Welcome back to Laugh Through the Turbulence.
The New York Jets
The 2025 NFL
Armand
Draft just
Membu.
happened. Some dreams came true, some GMs lost their minds, and the Jets did not draft a putter too early. Let's break it down. And we're effing back. How's it going, boys?
What's up,
What's
Jet
going
fans?
on? What's
Draft
going
is
on?
over. Let's do it.
The draft is over. And you know what? I think they came out pretty good. I guess as we were saying when we did the live show, if anyone saw it, basically, I think it's safe to say we were more relieved by the draft rather than wowed or like disappointed or anything like that, just because it seemed like we kind of covered everything that we needed to outside of maybe defensive tackle, and we can get into that. But maybe the best idea right now is to just check out the picks, right? So we have them here basically, and we're not going to do undrafted free agent signings right now because, well, let's just be real. A lot of them are probably not even going to make the team. They're just a lot of those are way bigger lottery picks than like round 5+, right? So if you want to go check it out, you can always check it out somewhere else. Maybe we'll do another episode so Adnan can do serious sports radio talk, even though I'd rather do an episode about are the Jets cursed, yes or no, maybe.
We're gonna do that. What are you talking about? We're gonna do that. We're doing
we're gonna do that. But I also rather get more updates also on the Sauce and Ice Spice drama. At some point,
there was a picture of them floating around social media that was a little interesting.
Like recently.
Yeah, a couple from this weekend or early Monday, but I think it was from this weekend.
Do we want to knock all preparation that we did for this and just talk that out of the blue, or
no? Let's talk about the draft and then we'll
get to that. We'll get to that.
Okay, so what we have here is an Excel template table that I put together because Excel. I have all our draft picks listed. I'm gonna go through the columns, the headers first before we go through the players themselves. But basically, we have round, the pick in the round, the player, the school they're from, position that they play, height, weight, position rank according to ESPN, as well as their overall rank according to ESPN, their grade per ESPN, and then I also put the PFF grade. Obviously, we go down the list. We have Membu, who was our first pick and probably the safest, most logical draft pick that we've ever made, and also probably the easiest one to predict of the last whatever years outside of maybe Zach Wilson, because that was just like the number 2 pick, but at least outside of the top 5, right? You had Mason Taylor in the second round, which we mocked over into our pool a lot. As AZ Thomas, I'm going to call it, just because I can't do that first name right now. I have too much going on.
Azariah.
I have too much going on.
I do have too much going on.
Or Azariah. I don't know.
Cornerback. We have Arian Smith, Georgia wide receiver. Malachi Moore, an Alabama safety. And then 2 guys from the U in the 5th round, Francisco Mayugoa and Tyler Barron. I think I got that last name. His nickname
is Kiko.
Yeah, I just find it funny that John has no time to say AZ Thomas's first name.
No, just to get that name down by heart.
But he pronounced Arian perfectly and with pride. So I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there as an observation.
It's a little intimidating when you have random apostrophes mid-name.
Yeah,
I think that's what it was.
Yeah, but I think it is Azariah Thomas. But AZ's perfect.
Oh no, I was talking about for you, John, not for me.
Yeah, what was the Arian one? Why did you go to Arian versus like Mason with me because I'm the white guy on the show? That's the real question. Yeah,
that's exactly why.
But
so you're calling me what?
An Arian Foster.
Arian Foster.
That's what I get, man.
Yeah. That's what...
All right. Anyway, we'll start with Membu, right? Just to kind of go over measurables and kind of where he ranked in this whole thing, right? 6'4", 332 pounds, which is just the right amount of tackle that you need. Maybe you want a little taller, but still, I mean, it's a little bit on the short side per, like, I guess the measurements and all that. But combine was cream of the crop, second fastest time from a lineman standpoint, right, or tackle, probably lineman, right, because the guards and centers are a little bit more chunkier. But and just like everything off the charts there in the combine, and the production on the field definitely made sense, right? The PFF grade was a 96, which is one of the highest in college football. The grade per ESPN was a 91. They had him as the 9th overall and number 1 at the position, over even Will Campbell. Guys, we were when this draft went on, we recorded it. Safe to say we were relieved, right? That
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think it was relief mainly because of all of the noise we heard, right, with defensive picks and all of that. So I think they made the right choice. And again, like you said, John, not the flashy choice, not the tight end, not a wide receiver. Obviously they didn't have a chance to draft him, but not Ashton Genty, and I'm sure there are people that wanted a player like that, but now the offensive line is complete, and I don't think you could have made a better pick if you're the Jets in that spot based on their needs.
Yeah, man. I mean, he only allowed one sack in 391 pass block snaps last year.
Allegedly, he said it wasn't
Allegedly, but it might not have been. But so 1, 0, 2, whatever it is, that's still extremely low. I think that's fantastic. I think he's, got 95, 96% of his snaps are at right tackle. So he's a natural right tackle. That's, something you guys were applauding, something that, I mean, it's definitely something that works in his favor. We need a right tackle. He's used to playing right tackle. It's a good fit. 4.91 in the 40-yard dash. I mean, that's blazing fast for a lineman. That's up there, by the way, with Tristan Wirfs. That's up there with Trent Williams. He's going to be obviously an immediate starter. He was top 2 tackle, consensus, and obviously the by far best right tackle in the entire draft. It's a total smash. I think it was the conservative, smart pick. It was the pick that Joe Douglas should have made when we passed on Wirfs for Becton.
Yep.
It's the no-brainer, safe, but high floor, decent ceiling. And this guy's only 21, and between him and Olu, we might have tackles for the next 10 years. We really might. These are 2 great guys. So, I mean, I'm not wearing a hat right now because my hat's off to the Jets for how they handled most of this draft, starting with Membu.
Okay. I mean, everyone it's kind of funny too. Pretty much the draft went as everyone expected through this pick, correct?
Indeed.
I mean, essentially, in every mock that we did, outside of let's call it Sanders in some of the mocks, right? Which we will talk about later. Don't worry, we'll get to it in case you haven't heard about what happened with Shedeur Sanders, right?
Wait, what happened? I have no idea.
We'll talk about it a little bit later. But basically, the order was Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Will Campbell, Mason Graham, Ashton Genty. And what's interesting was that, Browns and Jags swapped picks, and they still went in that order.
Still the same order, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, everything was very predictable, even with that trade, right? It's just funny because, honestly, I would have thought that the Jags had the bigger need for DT and that the Browns would have had the bigger need for cornerback at that point. You know what I mean? That's what's really interesting. But yet they still made the picks the way they did. Yep. So, obviously Tyler Warren, your homie, Adnan, was on the board, and he wasn't even the first tight end taken off the board, which I thought was really interesting.
I thought that was a little crazy, to be honest.
But
I get it to a point, but man, I don't know.
But I don't know. Overall, I think you have to just give that an A, right? That pick an A. You didn't have to panic and move up or do anything there. And luckily, they made the pick when they did, because 2 picks later, the Saints did go tackle, best available tackle as well, with Kelvin Banks. Okay, now we go to round 2. Mason Taylor. We wanted a tight end or a pass catcher, right? At least. And Mason Taylor was there. He was the number 3 tight end off the board completely, with those first 2 going off the board. Obviously his dad is a pretty good football player from back in his day.
Yeah, you could say that.
It looks good, Jason Taylor, from the clip that we saw. Jason Taylor.
He is. I mean, listen, he's a handsome man.
That family has great genes.
Genetics, man. Yeah. When I was younger and a lot fitter, and I didn't have the beard, I used to get compared to him sometimes, and I would consider that a great compliment back when I lived in.
Was Joy Taylor in the group or no?
No, I think they might be distancing themselves just a little bit for the
I'm just so happy that Joy Taylor has to now root for the Jets, basically.
Yeah. that's
What
fun.
do you guys think? All right, so just go back to Mason Taylor. Basically, 6'5", 251. That's a tight end, right? That's a tight end. He was 4th ranked in the position behind Arroyo from Miami, which they're just different tight ends, right? Arroyo is really more of a pass catching tight end, and Mason Taylor is kind of a little bit more well rounded, but still is a pass catching tight end, mind you, right?
John, quick question on the position. Is that all from ESPN, you said?
The position rank is from ESPN, and also it was the same thing too with PFF. He was the 4th one on.
Yeah, and I think it's also your flavor, what you're looking for. But even the 4th best tight end, he was in consideration. You know, a lot of draft guys were saying that the Eagles could take him at the end of round 1. For the Jets to get him where they got him is a home run, and not having to trade anything to do it was even better.
Yeah, he fell exactly where he was predicted to fall, which was our pick, 42.
Yeah. And I mean, it was interesting because like some of the talks were like maybe going wide receiver at this point too, just because there was still a lot of talent out there, but like it did kind of start to trickle out towards the end of the 1st and the beginning of the 2nd, if that makes sense, right? Actually, not so much in the 1st round. Like Matt Golden was the last one, right? There was only I think 3 wide receivers taken. Sorry to just correct myself there, but in the 2nd you had Jaden Higgins, who we really liked, right?
Yeah.
He went pretty quickly to the Texans, who have so many receivers, and they drafted another Iowa State receiver later, which was interesting. And then Luther Burden, who I thought was a 1st-round talent as well, went off the board. That would have been interesting to go back-to-back Mizzou, but yeah, I mean, pretty happy with that pick. There's nothing there that was kind of out of question, right?
And I think one of the big things when you look at Mason Taylor, I'm just looking at his profile here on Pro Football Focus, right? It looks like he's played basically. So this season he played 556, pass snaps, 251 in line, 248 in the slot. Same for his first 2 years. It's really evenly distributed between in line and in the slot. So I think there is a lot of opportunity for him to get better as a blocker and to be utilized more in the passing game. I just don't think LSU used him properly, right? I mean, 1.23 yards per route run. He was running a lot of shallow stuff. So I think this is it's a pick for right now, but I think his ceiling is unlimited as well. So I think
you know what? And it's crazy that you say that because he's actually LSU's all-time leader among tight ends.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was the fact for you to even like somewhat say, or even, and you make a good argument, and the fact that you based on a statistical argument, so the fact that you could make a statistical argument that for underutilization on a guy who's the all-time leader at that position at such a big program like LSU, that's kind of scary upside for this guy. I mean,
LSU is wide receiver university, not tight end university. That's
I know that, but there's still a big program that always produces a lot of good talent.
Yes,
and he's not even 21 yet, right? He's going to be 21 in a couple of months, so like a lot of upside there.
Yep, good stock coming from, that Hall of Famer background.
Yep.
He has that pedigree there. Again, I think, I'm not overvaluing it, but when it's there, I point it out because, you see it all the time. Like sometimes it's just nepotism and people just get kind of handed things just because their dad was whoever. But a lot of times those people earn their stripes because, people, just say, oh, that's just that. They got to work a little bit harder, to kind of prove themselves. And they have the genetics for it. And then they also have the tutelage. You know what I mean? Like it's great to grow up around that. A lot of NFL players, they don't grow up around it. They don't know what it's like. They don't know what it takes or whatever. They're just they're the first ones doing it. Someone like this guy who's seen it done, knows what success looks like. I mean, that's good. That's a great thing. And then the main thing, more than anything is that he's a great receiving target for our new quarterback who loves to throw to tight ends. He is instantly a late round fantasy sleeper for me. I thought
I was the fantasy king and I could talk fantasy and you couldn't. You didn't win any leagues and you keep losing fantasy bets to me.
I lost one stupid bet by like one place because
have you won one?
Because he
me?
got
you want to bet against me that we had on the show. If you want to bet against me on the show.
How many have we had? There's like one or two tops.
We've had 2, and I'm undefeated. Undefeated, never lost.
I don't know if we've had 2. I know we had the one. We had the IU. Okay, the IU and the Will McDonald. Okay. Again, you keep getting lucky with these freaking injuries, bro. That's like bro. That's like you betting on a game and then like Jordan Travis injury happened.
Man. Injuries go both ways.
Yeah, well, it didn't go your way. So I mean, it didn't go my way.
Ayuk had the bet. Right, it was just with the Will McDonald bet that the injury helped with Jermaine, I guess. But even still, right? Ayuk had a tremendous year. The year we made the bet with Mike Evans, but Mike Evans just dominated that year.
He played one less entire game when you're both
one less entire game. My God,
that makes a lot when they're neck and neck in ranking. Mm-hmm. They were neck and neck in production and rank. Like I think Ayuk was like 10th best receiver and Evans was like 9th or 8th or something like that. They were one place apart.
Okay.
Exactly. So
anyway, W's a W. Yeah. Okay, now let's go back to our homie. I'm gonna try this. Azariah Thomas.
Coin flip wins don't mean anything, John.
Am I right on the pronunciation?
Say it again.
Azariah
Thomas. Fuck.
There you go. I think it's Azariah. Yeah.
All right. Basically, this was kind of a little bit of surprise given that we thought we were solidified at cornerback, but I guess you can't have enough corners, right? Because right now they don't have a dime, right? But anyway, this is Aaron Glenn profile all over. Even though Aaron Glenn was a short corner, he likes big corners, right? 6'2", 197. He was the 8th ranked per ESPN at the position. The overall rank was a 67. So technically a steal, or just because I guess if you do the math, they were drafting around like 70 something, right?
Well, it was the 73rd pick, so kind of right where he was expected to go.
Okay, but still kind of a steal. 67 versus 7, whatever. 79 grade per ESPN and a 76.5. All right, coverage was pretty good. I'm just gonna give some stats here. Had 357 coverage snaps last year. Only had 33 targets at him and only gave up 17 catches and 141 yards. This was probably a better pick than we're going to, probably take for granted until it happens when like he has to step in. But I feel comfortable with this guy being on one of the outside corners. If God forbid Stevens doesn't work out or something happens with Sauce, correct?
Yeah, I mean, he's a big-bodied guy, physical play style, fits what we're trying to do, what Aaron Glenn has said we're trying to do with being and building a physical Jets team, a team that plays hard, hits hard. You'll see this, later on with, Marigoa and others. But, like, I think this is a great pick for what we're trying to do. I think is a great compliment to Sauce Gardner, who had some struggles with the tackling and stuff like that last year. I like it. I'm very optimistic about this pick.
Yeah. And note one thing: he didn't give up a touchdown last year.
Yep.
So with this pick, I love the player. I just don't understand the pick. Right. And I've tried to wrap my mind around like why they did this. You use the 73rd overall pick on what is right now, again, a top 75 pick on someone who is right now your corner 4, right? Where you had other needs that you could have hit and maybe went to and drafted a developmental corner later on. Right? I mean, you look at some of the guys that were there after him. They could have went Princely, the edge from Ole Miss. They could have went Jordan Birch, edge from Arizona. Jalen Noel, wide receiver from Iowa State, who the Texans drafted. Right? There were a lot of players on this board that were more of a fit for what they needed as opposed to a corner 4. And I just
Xavier Watts, for example, that was another one.
Right, Xavier Watts is still there. Now, I really like the Malachi Moore pick, right? So that's kind of.
So do I.
You want to go in order, or like
No, let's keep going there for a second. But just talking about Thomas, I don't understand from like a roster construction perspective. You're locked in with Sauce. You're going to re-sign him. I know this regime didn't do it, but Michael Carter was re-upped. You gave Brandon Stevens starter money, and then with a top 75 pick, you drafted a corner. I just don't know if that's the best use of allocation when you take a look at what was still on the board based on other positions where they could have used depth, development, a player to step in right now like Jalen Noel. So again, I love the player, perfect fit for what they're looking to do, but from a resource allocation perspective, I just don't understand it. And this is what knocked the my individual grade for them down this one pick.
I will just say one thing on this pick, and by the way, I think Mason Taylor was an A for us too. And this, yes, and I think what the logic here was round 3 or beyond, they were just going to go best available per their board, right? Because obviously this didn't address an immediate need, right, in terms of a position, right? And that's what Adnan is saying. It's correct. It sucks that they didn't have the ammunition to trade up a little bit into the higher up into the third, or let's just say into the late second. Because I thought there was 2 guys that we really liked that were kind of in that area in the early third round that got scooped up before the Thomas pick. There was Darius Alexander, the Toledo DT, and then there was Kyle Williams, who the Patriots scooped up, and that was a wide receiver from Washington State. Those were I think if those 2 were on the board as well, they would have gone with one of those 2, to be totally fair.
Right, and I think
that's the thing, as I'm saying. After that, it started to really thin out, and what was really interesting was that this kind of started the run on cornerback, right?
Well, one of the things we talked about this, like the Jets got ahead of all of the runs.
Yeah.
Right? They took Membu and then tackle started to go. They took Taylor, tight end started to go.
Yep.
They took Thomas, corner started to go. So and like I said, I love the player. This just makes me question Brandon Stevens even that much more. The money that you paid him, that's the thing that's just perplexing me.
Okay, but insurance is always good at a very important position.
Yeah, and it's important in their defense as well. So, I get it from that perspective. But again, I would have liked them see them go to a different direction and then maybe draft a corner a little bit later on. But, he's a great player, so you can't.
Yeah, I just wanted to say really quick that's that is a little bit of a knock on him, especially, and this was kind of a general criticism of mine of the draft, is that this draft was stacked with DTs and we didn't get one. Like, that's kind of crazy. I think that's a miss on this regime and on the the draft. That's why it definitely cannot be an A grade. But I still think ultimately it is a good grade for us. But yeah, I can agree and see what you're saying as far as this pick.
I would give the pick a B just because it fits the need.
Yeah,
it's a good player at that pick, but that's why it's a B, because it wasn't a DT at that level or something of bigger need at that point. And it was probably DT, if anything, right? That seemed like the only pick that wasn't addressed as and I guess wide receiver, if you really think about it. Wide receiver and DT were probably the biggest needs at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think
another quarterback.
And I think one of the things that they were kind of looking at a little bit from those positions is now the comp pick clock is over, right? So now I think they'll be more willing to go out. There are veteran defensive tackles available, veteran wide receivers that when you sign them, they won't be counted, against your comp picks. So I think now we might see some movement there. So that might have played into it as well. But I still would have liked something else at this pick.
Yeah. Okay. Now I guess move on to our next pick, right?
Yep.
Yeah, let's go.
Arian Smith. Okay.
Nope. I like it.
A very fast Georgia wide receiver. 6 foot, very light, 179. That's lighter than all 3 of us for sure. He's the first player on this list. That's actually the only player on this list that's lighter than me, actually, right now. I've lost some weight. Just to keep my own arm. But position rank 29 per ESPN, 257, and our lowest ranked player in the 4th round, right? Is 41, and then his PFF grade was pretty bad. And the thing that really knocked him on the grade was a thing that wide receivers have to do, which is catch the ball. He dropped 5 balls in total, which is gonna kill your grade as a wide receiver for sure. And I guess he fumbled once, but essentially that's the one issue with him was the drops, right? And actually, funny as it is, he was a 5th year senior, and last year was his worst graded year per PFF, but also the highest volume year that he had too in terms of everything.
Yeah, and for me, I know Monty, you didn't like this pick. I kind of like this pick, right? And I look at it from this perspective, right? One, he was Georgia's leading receiver, right? And one of the things on the broadcast they talked about is him fitting kind of the type of players that the Jets are looking for. He was known as a leader on that team, hard worker, right? Somebody who the team rallied around. So I think those are big things. But most importantly, man, he gives the Jets a dimension they did not have, right? An absolute burner at wide receiver. So I think when you look at a guy like him, starting in the 4th round, you're really just taking dart throws, right? And when you look at a guy like him, the way that he profiles, I don't think it's a big deal to take a shot on a guy that brings a skill set that you don't have in your receiver room, right? On top of that, I think another reason why they drafted him is because when they took him, he was the last receiver available that the Jets had in for a 30 visit. So I think they got to know him, saw what he was about, and made the pick based on those things, his speed. Aaron Glenn even talked about, Jamison Williams had drop issues in college as well, and he turned out to be pretty decent, and he was a 1st rounder. So to get somebody with speed who needs to work on his hands absolutely in the top of the 4th round, I don't think you can go wrong there.
I gotta disagree. So just to correct you, John, I'm not sure if I'm right or you're right, but what I read from a few different sources was that he actually had 10 drops in 2024.
Yeah,
and a 16.7% drop rate on catchable targets. That's not good. So there's the frying pan hands. Yes, he's a speedster. Yes, he's a field stretcher, can take the top off, but that's not really a threat if he's not catching the ball. I mean, and also it's when we took him to that matters. I think we definitely could have waited. I think a player like him would have fallen. I think he would have fallen. So there's that. Then there's the massive injury risk. He's got a meniscus injury. He's got a tibia injury. He's only got 1 full year of starting in 5 years of playing. This is beyond a high risk pick. And I get it, dart throw, high risk, high reward, but I don't think the upside is there for the level of risk of a player that this is. I see what you're saying, Adnan, the speed, he's definitely got some physical tools, but between the drops and the injuries, I am not optimistic about this pick at all. I think we could have gotten him around later, and just not happy.
He got undrafted, honestly. It's very possible, but the speed, right? And I will say this, just to sorry to interrupt. We didn't have a speed guy.
You're good.
Yeah, we didn't have a speed guy whatsoever. And you wanted speed to stretch it, and you got it, right? Because everyone else that they have right now in that receiving core, not including tight end, obviously, just receiving core, right? Garrett, who's more intermediate and just quick as hell, right? In terms of shiftiness, right? Lazard, just big, right? That ain't breaking speed records. Reynolds, that's
big and mid.
Yeah. And then Tyler Johnson, am I right on that again?
Yeah, Tyler Johnson, also Josh Reynolds.
Josh. Yeah, he said Josh Reynolds.
Sorry.
Johnson. Also kind of more, they didn't have the just go guy, so at least you have that.
Yeah. So what I think happened here, and I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Bills traded up like 2 or 3 times in this draft, and at least 2 of those times they cut right in front of us. I think this time, I think one of them was in the fourth, and I think it was before this pick.
I'm looking at it.
That
They
I'm
traded
looking at it
up
right now. It was 109.
the Kentucky guy. They traded up
Yeah.
right for the Kentucky guy. So
Yeah, defensive
they're looking for
tackle.
best available. Then okay, maybe they did that there for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
And
I
they
think
also traded up in the third to take an edge guy, Landon Jackson from Arkansas.
I think at some point that threw off our mojo a little bit. They might have grabbed someone that we were eyeing. And that's the only thing I can think of that kind of forced our hand on this pick. Because to me, this is this ain't the pick.
I will say this though. There was a little bit of a gap for when the next receiver was taken in that round. The next one was Jalen Lane, who's kind of similar, 5'10", 190, so a little chunkier, but also a fast guy, 4.34, and I believe Arian Smith was a 4.36. So hard to say. And also had a higher rank and a higher grade per ESPN. I don't have the PFF in my hands, but I don't know. Maybe they just like them more than him. Like still kind of this 6 feet versus 5. What I say 5'10", 5'10", yep. Right? So,
yep.
But Arian Smith is much skinnier, and apparently 185 per PFF. I don't know who's telling the truth on his weight at this point.
Yeah, whatever.
I don't know.
All right.
Hey, moving on.
Moving on.
More. Also, they traded up to get this pick. Safety from Alabama, who's a true captain. And this was a fantastic pick. One of my favorite picks.
I was going to say, this is my favorite pick I think they made.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I said it, so therefore I'm the one that's right.
No, you said one of my favorites. I said
my
favorite.
God.
Well, Membu.
This guy is the worst.
I know.
I'm the worst. But this guy is a stud. All right. 5'11", which is a little bit on the short side for safety, 196.
Well, PFF has him at
my size.
foot.
My size, okay. 14th ranked at the safety position, 197 overall grade. ESPN gave him a 50, which I thought was really shocking considering the PFF grade was way higher than that. I'm just going to go over his grades, right, for his last year, and also a fifth-year guy as well, right? So a little bit on the older side. He'll be 20. He's already 23 and a half, basically, so he's going to be 24 when the season essentially starts, right? 84 defensive grade per PFF. Run defense, 75 and a half. Tackling, 89.3, so an outstanding tackler. Pass rush is not there. Didn't really have that many pass rushing snaps to begin with, 21. The coverage, though, pretty stellar, too, an 89.4. And Alabama, best of the best.
So also, on top of all that, John, what I love about him, snaps by alignment last year, he played 180 snaps in the slot, 219 in the box, and 350 as a deep safety, right? So he's kind of like, and I'm not saying he's as good right now, but he's kind of like another Alabama guy, Brian Branch, who the Lions drafted, and they just used him as a chess piece all over the secondary, right? So this is kind of what he looks like to me, and the Jets need a guy like this in the secondary to maximize a Glenn Wilkes defense. So I think this was just an outstanding pick, and I think the starting safeties are going to be Cisco and more, barring injury or anything like that. Because I think he's going to walk in and just be a starter they're going to see him. They're going to be like, yup, this is the guy.
Yeah. He's definitely going to compete with Tony Adams on that one. And he's probably going to beat out Tony Adams.
He's going to beat out Tony. I think as a Jet fan, I'm sick of seeing Tony Adams play as much as he does. And I think that when you look at this coaching staff, they have no allegiance for him or to him. Malachi Moore is now their guy. So I think, as long as he does what he's supposed to do, I think Tony Adams' starter days are numbered.
I will say Tony Adams last year was bad, correct? And also banged up a lot last year, right? The year before, though, was pretty stellar, right?
Yeah, listen, I think he's fine for a third safety, but I don't think you're going to have a great defense with him as a starter.
A starter, exactly. Yeah, I think this guy can come in and start over him.
I hear you on that. I guess, yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Hopefully it does work itself out.
And he had
So-
an 89.4 coverage grade too.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
yeah,
he,
I did
he
say that.
also
Yeah.
played.
Oh, I thought you said tackle grade.
No, I said every grade.
He also played 100 snaps in his career on the defensive line. So maybe that's why they didn't take a defensive tackle.
Oh, that's so funny.
Maybe. I mean, honestly, at this point, if you didn't fill your needs and your really dire needs in the beginning, then like you do, maybe you just go best available. And maybe the Jets are really comfortable with all the DTs they stocked up on during this offseason because they did get a lot of rotational guys.
Yeah, no, and listen, I think that they got the rotational guys, and this is a pick that, like, we're going to look at this pick in a year, and people are going to say, how the hell was he available there? Right? That's what I really think with Malachi Moore. So I think it was a fantastic pick.
Or the Jets curse kicks in, and obviously everything doesn't work out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, next pick was Francisco Kiki Maego.
Kiko.
Sorry. Thinking about an Asian back in the day. Anyway, so here we go. Basically was, is 6'2" linebacker at 233. So very prototypical size for a linebacker. Position rank was 21. Overall rank was 252, which is just a little bit better than Arian Smith. But the grade was a 42, which is just also a little bit above that. But the PFF grade, 74.7 overall on the defense last year. Run defense, this is what we got him for. He's a run defender, so he's gonna be that third linebacker at this point, right? And then if something happens to Quincy after that, maybe. But 84 grade on the run defense. Tackling was 59.3, which is a little on the weak side. The pass rush 66.6, which is just average, and the coverage was 60.5. It's a 5th round pick at this point. What do you guys think at this point?
Look, I mean, special teams guy, depth linebacker, and just a theme that we've all seen, right? I like that they're going big school guys. Another big school guy played against top tier competition. He played a couple of years, I think in Washington State, I believe,
Correct.
and then transferred to Miami. So I think it was a fine pick for the 5th round, a dart throw. And, the Jets throughout their history, regardless of coaching staff, have kind of found a way to develop linebackers. So I think this was a fine pick at this point in the draft.
I think this is a great pick, actually. 11 tackles for loss last season in Miami. And what do you have? 96 tackles. Like, also, another thing is he had a 9.2 RAS score.
Yeah,
that's like top 300 all time. Like at that position, like he's a run stuffer. He's a physical hitter. He's another guy that fits this philosophy that the Jets are trying to shift through, supposedly under Glenn, which is physical players, physical team, hard hitting, that sort of thing. He seems like a run stuffer, like the type of guy that we definitely need. And, he's a guy that can just, you blink and he's in the backfield, breaking up a run play. I like this play a lot. I like this pick a lot. I think he's going to be better than we think he is. And, at the very least, as a rotational guy with Quincy and Sherwood, like I think you can't go wrong there with that level of athleticism. The defensive coaching pedigree hopefully can step in and polish him up. But, I think he's a great guy.
Great guy. We'll find out if we love him or hate him in a couple of years. Next pick, and the last pick because of all the trade ups and also some swaps that they did. I think with the Ravens at one point coughed up one of our 6th rounders. Tyler Barron, one of the easier names to say on this list.
This is a great pick. I like this pick a lot.
Edge guy from Miami as well. Another big school, 6'5", 258, which is great size for an edge, right? Position rank 24th. Overall on the board, 140. Grade by ESPN was 61, and his PFF grade was a 76. Last year, he had 10 sacks on 250 pass rush attempts. He actually had pretty phenomenal pressure rates. I don't have him off the top of my head, but if you do the math there, you could figure out. But also on true pass rush sets, he was fantastic. But I'm just going to go through the grades real quick. 76.1 overall. Run defense, 76.7. So Guy can defend the run, which is great. Tackling's a little poor, it's 51.9. Pass rush grade was an 84.4, and the coverage grade is obviously whack because he's not really doing it. But he did go in coverage about 33 times last year, which is interesting in itself. And he was a Tennessee guy for a good while and transferred to Miami last year. Even in Tennessee, he still had success. Just so you know, he had 6 sacks the year before on basically the same amount of pass rush snaps, and the year before that, 3 sacks, and then 6 sacks the year before that. All very similar pass rush snap counts, about 250 each year, which I thought was interesting in itself. I think it's one of the better picks. I don't think it's the best pick per value that we had. I think it's Malachi Moore. I'm just going to one-up Adnan there. But essentially, I think this is a solid pick. You can't have enough edge guys. This guy will compete with the aforementioned Michael Clemens, Mr. Scary.
Yeah, and I think another piece of this is that, like, you look over his entire career, he's played, 300 snaps, in a tackle position. So he's someone that you can move inside a little bit, play him on the edge, gives you some versatility, just some more rotation depth on the defensive line, regardless of position. And, I think this guy might be the one that replaces Michael Clemens. So I think this could be just a home run pick. I'm a big fan of it. I think they had very few misses in this draft, if any.
Yeah, I mean, Arian Smith is probably the only one, right? If you really want to get nitpicky. But we don't know. These guys know more than we do, Yeah,
and I think, like, if your biggest sticking point with a player in terms of profile is, your 4th round pick, that I think that was a pretty good draft.
Yeah. And and if you guys want me to do the pass rush sets stuff, essentially, the true pass rush sets, his overall grade was a 90, which is just a shade below Abdul Carter's, who is just a monster. But his pass rush win rate on true pass rush sets was 19.9, which actually was better than Abdul Carter's.
Fantastic.
Yeah, not the best though, but still pretty damn good. It was actually for someone that did a minimum of, like, I think it's about 80 pass rush snaps. It was top 5 last year on true pass rush sets, which is
I think he'll at least be Michael Clemens, which out of a end of the draft pick, fine.
Yep. Overall though, what do you guys give as a grade for this draft class?
Well, I mean, like I said, the big pluses are nailed our 2 most pressing needs at tight end, at right tackle. Made a really good move with the trading up for Moore. Great value late in the draft. Got some solid, role players, rotational guys, some solid upside. But that Arian Smith pick, didn't really love it. You guys brought up the Azariah pick and the negatives with that, and again, not getting a DT when we could definitely have used one in a draft where there was a lot of DT talent, like not just rotational guys, like legit guys who might have been able to be starters to learn behind a DT pro like Quinnen Williams. Like, I think that was a huge miss. So, for me, and I don't think that this is pretty crazy. I think I've heard this as a pretty common grade. I think I have to give it a B plus. I think B plus is a solid grade. I don't think it's an A. I don't think it can be an A. I don't think it can be a C plus or lower. So it's got to be somewhere in the B range. I'm going to say B plus.
Question on the DT stuff, right? Because the Bills did trade ahead to land TJ Sanders out of South Carolina. And he was almost a 1st round grade. I mean, that might have been the pick.
I have to believe that would have been the pick if he was available at that pick.
Yeah, because even I was talking when we were chatting, right? I was saying, like, hey, DTs are really, really hot right now. And even like right after us, Alfred Collins from Texas won.
Yeah.
But I'd also say, right, when you look at that, another guy that we mocked to the Jets, was Ty Robinson. He went the pick right after Arian Smith, I believe.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, if you were going to go defensive tackle, you had plenty of opportunity to do so. If they did go defensive tackle over Arian Smith, I would have completely understood it. You know, so I don't know if it was a thing where they had Arian Smith ranked so much higher. And I think it's another thing that you really have to keep in mind with teams is when they bring in players for a 30 visit and they really like them, they're going to overdraft them. It happens to every team, right? Because you had him in the building. You saw how he interacted with everybody. You start to – and I think, like, that really impacted their decision there. But, you know, I think
quick question on Arian Smith. Because Fields was in Georgia for a little while. Did they overlap at all?
I don't think so, no, because Fields was there just his freshman year, and then he transferred to Ohio State. So I don't know if they overlapped.
Okay, fair enough. But it was a fair question because he was there in 2020, Arian Smith. And I guess, Fields went to Ohio State in 2020, right? So they didn't know that. But they were close. Close. Okay. I guess we can do the rest of the league, if that makes sense at this point, right? Yeah, and I guess it's safe to say we kind of all give the Jets like a B+, A- maybe on this draft, just because they didn't address the DT and wide receiver the way we had wanted, which were two of the big needs, and I guess quarterback as a late flyer, especially when Kyle McCord was available for a good while, and that's someone we really like too.
Yeah, I think like a B+ is applicable here. You know, it was a solid draft, and hopefully all these guys will play. So with this draft, I see a path for each of these guys to contribute, right? And I think that's what you want with any draft. And if they can walk away, right, you're walking away with two starters in Membu and Taylor that are walking into starting jobs. Perhaps Malachi Moore and AZ Thomas, you know, maybe he usurps Brandon Stevens. We don't know. So you're walking out with 3 starters and potentially 4. So I don't think you can. This is a very good draft, you know?
Yeah. And on top of that, with that pick, I will just say this. You have 4 corners for the next 3 years at least. Because assuming that Sauce is going to get extended, because that just seems inevitable at this point.
Obviously. Yeah.
Michael Carter got extended last season, actually, right?
Yeah.
Stevens is for 3 years. This is going to be for 4 years. So you got at least 3 years of these guys, right? Yeah. So and you don't have to worry about it, right?
Mm-hmm. Now they should not have to worry about using resources at corner at least for a little while.
Correct. I guess the value might have been too good at that point. All right. So the rest of the league. I mean, the first round was really interesting, just kind of the way things kind of flowed, if that makes sense. I mean, obviously the first picks were the way they were, right? But then, Tet went to the Panthers, which I thought was a little bit of a reach, but they needed it, right? The Loveland over Tyler Warren thing was interesting to me, just because, I thought Chicago was the pencil in for Warren at that point, right? Because all the mocks were saying that, right? Atlanta didn't have to trade up for Jalen Walker. That made sense.
And then they made the dumbest trade I've almost ever seen to trade back into the first round for Pierce and give up a future first round. Oh, man.
Yeah, they needed edge so bad, though. That's the thing, though.
Dude,
they got 2 edge guys now for 5 years.
Yeah, no, I get it. But, I mean, at the same time.
They don't have to pay him.
Dude, I get it. I totally get it. You know, but if for some reason Penix doesn't pan out and he gave up a future first in a draft that is going to be littered with quarterbacks to a division, to a team in your conference, that was really rich, man. You know, you could have gotten an edge with your second round pick. But
and really quick on the on the Tyler Warren not going before Loveland. I think that was just a matter of Loveland being arguably the better receiver at tight end. I think Warren obviously has the more broad skill set and he's a comparable receiver, but I think they wanted another two. They want to load up on targets for for Caleb Williams. So yeah, I think he was good. I think it was a good card.
Yeah. So, do we want to talk about who slipped out of the first round, the second round, third round, fourth round,
Yeah, let's do it.
deep into the
Let's
fifth?
do
Shedeur
it.
Sanders took a little bit of a slide.
A little bit.
Phone calls thinking that he was going to get drafted.
Yeah.
Including by our very own former very own Jeff Ulbricht's son. Or son's friend, because you could tell it's funny, like the kid, like you could tell, you couldn't tell who made the call, but that kid in the background going like, that was totally Jeff Ulbricht's kid, you know? Like they had the same freaking mug. Oh my god. I think it's very laughable that this happened to Sanders. I feel a little bad that it made it to 5 rounds, basically, which is like not even the first round on day.
That's ridiculous.
It's a little ridiculous.
It's absolutely
but
ridiculous.
the guy didn't play ball at all. Like what I mean by that is like you didn't work out for anybody, right? He skipped the combine completely, right?
I think he was there for the meetings, but
yeah.
didn't do any on-field work.
That's what
Yeah.
I say. Thank you.
Which a lot of players do, and it probably would have helped him because his physical traits are not why he's being considered. It's his ability to produce, his ability to read the field, things that you can't see in how far you can throw the ball in his 40 time.
Yeah, but then to just kind of go off, like I guess really poorly on these interviews, right? That is what the talk is from a couple, I guess, assistants or whatever. And I thought the media reaction was the most interesting to it. Like Kuiper was like, he almost had, I don't want to call it a Jimmy the Greek moment, but it kind of was where Jimmy the Greek, I mean, he said something racist and that's not what Kuiper did, but it's just like you saw like a sports commentator or like, a sports analyst just kind of lose his marbles, right? Like during the draft. And it seemed like Kuiper kind of lost his marbles on this one. Like the fact that he got passed up so much. And like, Kuiper, you're wrong a lot, and you are right occasionally too. I just thought it was very strange. And then like, what's his face from Good Morning Football really was like, shame on you, the offensive assistant for leaking that or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, but
you're betraying the trust of that meeting just to shit on a player because he rubbed you the wrong way. Like I don't think that's on. I don't think that's on that person to do it. You know what I mean? And if it wasn't Sanders' son, and if it wasn't a cocky quarterback with that who and then also race is
I don't know
brought
about
up
race.
is being brought up as a factor.
Cam, I'm going to defend it just because Cam Ward was the first pick.
Well, I mean, and
right,
not just Cam.
And Milroe went before Sanders, and
it's not but that's not what they're talking about. It's
talking about
it's talking about being in your place as a person of color, as a black person of color. It's not just they love they love having the black dude that's gonna shuck and jive and da 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 and yes sir, I love it, be here sir. Like that kind of guy is always gonna get. He's going to get a lot of picks, like guys like, like Herschel Walker, George Foreman, like guys like that who were supposedly like that type of personality. Yeah, allegedly, yeah. I mean, he was characterized that way.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was associating with football.
Yeah, I'm just saying in sports. I was just saying in sports in general. But anyway, what I was getting to is that you have a guy who's not really, like you said, not really playing ball, not being the the quote unquote kind of agreeable, easygoing guy. And I think that's really what it is that's where the race plays in, is because they don't want that type of black person to be making.
But I think, and what I would say in relation to that, Monty, is I think it's a much, 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 much bigger deal when it's a quarterback, right? And your quarterback has to be the, yes, sir, I love you, sir, thank you, sir. That has to be your quarterback regardless of race, right? If he were a linebacker, a wide receiver, any other position, you can be your brash, arrogant self, whether you're white or black. But the fact that you're a quarterback, you can't be that. And
Sure.
I'm sorry, it's like, it may suck to say, but, you know, NFL GMs and head coaches and owners, you got to be Dak Prescott, right? Like, that's what you got to be. Is that
and I'm not, and you know what? I don't disagree with you. I'm not saying that that's the sole reason. I'm saying that it was, you know, kind of like a bunch of things mixed together. That, and then also what I'm saying is what we saw as far as like the quote unquote knocks against him were not enough for him to fall as much as he fell.
Well,
without
actually,
it being some other shit.
Well, no, I think it was justified, right? So here's the way you have to look at it: is his tape, right? The NFL evaluated him as a backup quarterback, right? So when you're evaluated as a backup quarterback, that's a different job.
How do you
right?
make that? How do you make that determination? Because there was because first of all, looking at
no elite arm strength, no elite speed. The best thing about him on the field was decision making, right? But there's just things about his game and just like the slow release, and under pressure. There's just things in there that were, I guess, questionable at whether or not it would translate to the next level.
Immediately, though, right? That's the thing. Immediately. So when you look at a guy like Sanders and you decide that he's going to be a backup, it's why Dylan Gabriel got picked before him, Jalen Milroe, because
that's what I'm saying. I don't think that he was necessarily automatically evaluated. Look at they're pretty look at look at PFF, look at all the analysts. Everyone rated him first, second rounder. There was no fifth rounder in his thing, and you can't say that they're just like, oh, it's a crash or whatever. Look at Mason Taylor. He was mocked 40. He was mocked and predicted 42, went 42. All the other players went more look at the beginning of the draft, went cookie cutter exactly how it was supposed to go, according to all the different mocks. A lot of players, I would say most, went at or around where they were expected to go, and then here's this kind of one player who just
may I real quick, because I haven't talked in a little while, right?
Yeah, go for it.
So there's a couple things, right? And I'm gonna try and eliminate race as much as possible here, because first off, I'm the white guy in the show. I should never talk race. I'm just not allowed to, right? But I'm gonna say this one thing, right? The talent was always was questioned by every team, right? And there's 32 teams out there that could have taken this guy, right? And realistically, a couple were just not, because they don't need quarterback whatsoever. But there are a lot of teams that would go for quarterback. Some of them, obviously, I'm going to say, like Pittsburgh, for example, right? They definitely need a quarterback, right? And they do have a black coach. I will just say that right off the bat, right? Mm-hmm. And they passed on him multiple times. But just to ignore that, right? No one that was not a pure fire top 5 talent has ever kind of conducted themselves like they did before going into a draft, right? Where your dad is saying, hey, there's some teams we don't want to go to, right? Which also dad saying, I would love to coach my son at the NFL level. Which, if you're a coach, right, and you are part of the decision-making process of drafting a player, right, you're going to draft someone that comes with the risk that maybe big shot dad, who Dion is, he's a big shot in the NFL, all-timer, top 100 player ever, and also a rising coach, he's going to try and come for your job. Also, Dion has a big mouth, right, on top of that, and just the drama that goes around with a high-profile college kid like Sanders, who oh, why isn't Sanders going in? What is the coach doing? Blah, 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 right? There's just so much of a headache that just comes with it, right? Just being the profile that Sanders is. Also, all the sponsorships that he had coming in, right? Nike, Gatorade, and I forgot which other one, but he was the only collegiate athlete to have it, right? It's just there's a lot to it. And teams don't like noise, right? They don't, especially at that position, unless you are so exceptionally good at that position, which teams didn't say. No one said, hey, he's that exceptionally good at it that we'll take all that shit that we don't like and just deal with it.
Yeah,
right?
There's definitely a bullshit to talent ratio, for sure.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that.
There was just too much of it.
And I
And,
think
and so many teams passed on him. I mean, just look at all the quarterbacks that just went before. I mean, Cam Ward was obviously going to go one, right? Giants passed on it. And by the way, and just to say the race thing, they had 2 black quarterbacks on the roster only at this point, and Tommy DeVito, right? Who's basically black, right?
Right, but I explained that already, though.
Okay. Saints when Tyler Show, who I didn't think was the 4th ranked on the board, right, from Louisville, and also the first time they drafted in the first 2 rounds of quarterback, right? Then Milroe went at Alabama, right, to back up Sam Darnold in Seattle. Dylan Gabriel was the next pick by the Browns, and then after that, yes, Sanders went, right? Like, and he's like the 5th quarterback on their option list right now, which is just like lo and behold, like one of those quarterbacks is not going to make the roster, right? Like whether it's Watson is going to be on IR, so you have 4 to play with, right? You have Pickett, you have Flacco, who's won a Super Bowl, even still Pickett, who's a former first rounder. I'm going to say that, right? Dylan Gabriel was their 3rd rounder, and you're less likely to cut a 3rd rounder than you are a 5th rounder, right? And then Sanders, right? And honestly, people thought Sanders was going to be the pick in round 2 when Cleveland scooped up those 2 extra seconds, right? We thought it too.
Yep.
It is crazy. It is a little crazy. I would have pulled the trigger on him at 4th on day 3, early day 3. If I were the Jets, I think at that point, I mean, we were thinking it, right? Would you? All right. Actually, here's the better question. Would you have taken Sanders in the 4th round, Mont?
I would not have drafted him.
I would have taken Sanders over Smith. Yeah.
I wouldn't have drafted him. I don't want him on the Jets. I would not have.
I would have taken him over Smith.
Right. And why is that? Okay, you would have just you said talent over the circus, right? Given that the Jets are the circus of circuses, right?
I mean, because by that point you're already in the 4th round. If he ends up not being, being too much of a problem or whatever, you cut him and then you go again next year and try to get a quarterback next year in a stacked quarterback draft. But at least now, you maybe have a guy who could be something. You know what I mean? Like, I think the Jets need to just keep chipping away at that quarterback position and keep trying.
Yeah.
Okay. Adnan, explain why you're on the no side, and it's probably very aligned with me.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. That circus, the noise. It's every time Justin Fields throws an incompletion, you're going to have Dion tweeting all week in every press conference he gives leading up to games. Why is Shedeur saying, you know what he's going to say? Hey, you're watching Justin Fields. Shedeur can't do that. That's going to be the whole thing for every single game. Yeah. Right? And the noise is just too much for a team with a new administration, a new coaching staff. You're trying to instill your program and you bring in a guy that is going to, and one of the things Joel Klatt said, and he's, the number 1 play-by-play guy for Fox College Football. He played football at Colorado, still holds a bunch of their passing records. He said what NFL teams hate is when the news story is in the backup quarterback's locker, right? And every single interview, that New York media is going to run into the door. Yep. They're going to run right to Shedeur's locker.
And I will say this too. It happened to us, right?
Yeah,
we had Tebow.
Yeah.
We had Tebow. And Tebow is as stand-up of a human being as there is and a winner, right? And even won in Denver, right? At least a playoff game before he got shipped out, which was kind of nuts if you really think about it, but they got Peyton Manning, right?
Right.
Like, it's just like, and that was a huge circus, and that you could argue that was really the downfall of the Jets, right? And Mark Sanchez, right? You could really argue that.
Yeah, because they weren't able to develop Sanchez properly, and I just don't think a 4th round quarterback is worth that. Now, if you told me that they drafted, Kyle McCord over Arian Smith, totally fair. If you told me they drafted Quinn Ewers or really any of these quarterbacks, I would have said, okay, I get it. If Milroe was there, I would have said you're a fool for not taking Milroe at that point in the 4th round, right? But I just think all of the things that come with Shedeur are just too untenable for his talent level and, for what the Jets are trying to do. So that's the main reason. And honestly, I mean, I know that I may be one of the few people that believes this. I just don't think he's that good of a quarterback. I just don't think he is. And I don't think he's worth all the headache. I just don't think he is.
The headache just got exacerbated with this whole draft process. Like, that's like the one time you just kind of have to be like when you interview for a job, you don't act like that. And you're interviewing for a job, and you know what I mean. And also,
we don't really know too. I mean, again, we have the one side of it from a team that was that had him ranked pretty highly. So I mean, even the team that that had an issue with him, they still had him ranked highly. I still think him falling that far is very much like
yeah, I hear you, but like
trying to put him in place or something,
right? But let's just list all the franchises that decided to take a quarterback right in this draft, right? Tennessee, they took care of it, right?
Yeah, they're out.
The Giants, right? Would say what you will of them not being a good franchise these last couple, it's still one of the prestigious franchises in football. I will say
because they got 2 Super Bowls in the last 20 years.
Giants, Can I say one thing about the Giants while we're on the subject? Did you guys hear what Todd McShay had to say about the Giants and Shedeur? Todd McShay came out and specifically said that when Shedeur went in to visit with the Giants, they put him on the board to like draw plays and do all of that stuff. And Brian Dable asked him a question. Shedeur was unprepared. Brian Dable called him out on it. And Shedeur basically said, I don't think I'm the quarterback for you guys. Right? Todd McShay, a very well-respected guy in the draft world, in the NFL world, specifically named Brian Dable as someone who went ahead and did this. Right? So I just don't, it's not this one anonymous source that kind of threw something out there, right? These were real, tangible things that I think multiple NFL teams saw, and the Giants won by name.
And on top of that, like the Steelers were a franchise who took Will Howard a little bit later, and they had ample opportunities to draft this kid. And that's one of the top franchises just in football, right? They're never a loser. They needed a quarterback. Maybe they get Aaron Rodgers, but they really needed a quarterback, right? They still said no.
Yeah, I mean, but that's kind of the point. The point is, like it's kind of like an unspoken thing. Like, we're not taking this guy. We're not gonna do that. It's kind of like when after like the Browns went rogue and did the whole Watson thing, like teams kind of like backlashed and they're not really going to be paying as much, or they're trying to negotiate those contracts down. Like teams will unspokenly, it's only 32 guys, they're all rich and white, they all kind of probably think somewhat similar, they're all best friends, they know each other very well.
Are white though. I'm going to just say that real quick.
Most of them are by far.
This is true.
Monty, on that point, right? I get what you're saying, but
look, I'm not trying to make it like, oh, he didn't get it, because there's a ton of question marks. There's a ton of things. There's obviously a talent to bullshit ratio that teams, NFL teams are not willing to play too much with. I get it. All I'm saying is that was a factor in it. And you can't tell me it's not in someone who went from 2 to 5 because of a couple guys said he had a bad interview and he had said some bad things. Like there's ain't no way. Not with the amount of production he had, not with what he was able to do on multiple different teams as a player, not with the pedigree, not with him working out with Tom Brady, not with the way he's able to process the field, like. And all the accolades and positive things that are on his book. You don't go from possibly first, definitely second to fifth, just because he was arrogant or whatever. Like it's more to it than that.
Right. And I think there have been a lot of quarterbacks that have had production and accolades and have done it over like all the things that you mentioned. They didn't get drafted until the 5th round. Will Howard won a championship. He didn't get drafted until the 6th round, right? You can go through all of these quarterbacks that have all of the things that you're saying, right? I just think it's in a
Tom McCord had better numbers than everybody, basically. You know,
right? You know, and
Sanders as well.
And when you're looking at quarterback, but really any position in the NFL, it's traits, and then production that matches the traits. And I just really believe that the main driver was that Shedeur's traits, he doesn't do anything elite physically. That was my same thing with Jackson Dart. I don't get why the Giants traded up for Dart. He doesn't do anything physically elite, right?
He's a huge Star Wars fan. I love that.
He is, which is really interesting.
That is pretty cool.
Him and Abdul Carter, like, it's just a funny thing, you know? And Monty, I hope it doesn't sound like we're piling on, you know what I mean? Because we're not trying to be.
No, it's fine. I figured it would. I figured I would be in the minority with this, opinion.
And look, I think what you hope came out of this for him is that it humbled the hell out of him, right? And now if he makes football the number one thing, there's no reason why he can't win that Cleveland job. With all those people in there, that room is still a mess, so he may be the most talented quarterback in that room. Joe Flacco will always have a better arm, but he's our age, right? And I can barely walk to the fridge without losing my breath. So I don't know, what this holds for Sanders moving forward, but it is probably the best landing spot for him, and I think he'll have a real opportunity.
Yeah. All right, moving on.
Yeah,
and obviously Ulbricht's kid and that whole prank stuff. They did on a couple guys. Bunch of jackasses, right? Jackasses, we'll just leave it at that, right?
They did it to Tyler Warren too, right?
They did it to Tyler Warren. They did it to one other guy.
I think Abdul Carter was the other one.
Yeah. Okay. Which, God, that's so bad. All right. Winners and losers of the draft outside of the Jets, because we're just going into an abyss of curse.
Eagles.
I want everyone to do a winner. Maybe not a loser, because it's kind of hard to say losers, but let's do a winner. Monty, I'll start with you.
Eagles for sure. I just think that was so I mean, first you start off with
best linebacker.
Jihad. What was his name? Jihad Campbell, exactly. Yeah, I remember the first name because it's so easy, but the guy was right. Dude, I need to rewatch that movie.
I know
that's such a good one. But the guy's projected top 15 and ends up falling all the way to 31, and that was just and that was not a function of
they traded back.
Right. That was not a function of he had so many question marks or whatever. I think that was really just a function of value fell because other teams wanted different things, and he's a linebacker. It's just what they needed to work on their defense, and they got it. They got also a high PFF grade safety in Mukuba. So they need to work on their secondary. They got McCord, Miles Hinton, Ty Robinson. They hit their defensive needs. They added depth, and they started off with a fantastic linebacker pick, and they got him for a great deal. I think they have a draft, honestly.
Anybody else honorable mention for you, Monty? Before I switch to Adnan,
The Bears.
Right. That was gonna be mine, but okay.
Right, sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead, Adnan.
Yeah, I think one of my winners, my adopted home. I think the Carolina Panthers had an exceptional draft, right? PFF gave them an A+, but I'm just looking at their draft, and I know people think that Ted McMillan went high. I get that, but I think when you also look at the pick, right, and what the Panthers are trying to do around Bryce Young. They're trying to get him big targets, right? Xavier Legette, big target. Adam Thielen is a big slot, even though he's older. Ted, he's a big wide receiver, right?
Yep.
So you're trying to build that offense for Bryce Young. So I really like that pick when you think about it in that context. And a lot of people wanted them edge, Jalen Walker. Then they went back to back with Nick Scorton and Princely Umanmielen from Ole Miss. Two awesome edge rushers I would have loved to see the Jets get, right? Phil doubled down on a need that they had. Then they went Trevor Etienne, right? Georgia running back. They needed to put another running back in that room because Jonathan Brooks tore his ACL again. So adding a young upside running back was great value there. Lathan Ransom, safety, Ohio State. Can never go wrong with Ohio State, guys. Mitchell Evans, tight end from Notre Dame. Another massive guy who, posted a 72.7 contested catch rate. And then Jimmy Horn, wide receiver from Colorado, has that NFL pedigree with his dad and is just another weapon, for Bryce Young. So I thought they did an exceptional job.
Yeah. I'll go with the Bears, although I will just say my honorable mentions are Baltimore because they landed Stark's best safety in the draft and Mike Green, who I was shouting for.
Yeah.
Edge guy. That's actually that's who we were chatting about. And I was like, get Mike Green, the edge from Marshall, who's going to be ridiculous. And I do like what Atlanta did, just doubling down on edge and then doubling down on safety. And they needed help on the defense so bad, right? But the Bears, in my opinion, won the draft. And that regime, that GM, since the Bryce Young trade, basically, he's won that trade, right? He ended up with Caleb, right? Say what you will if that's going to work out, because Bryce Young actually looks like he might be better in the end. But still, he also got DJ Moore out of it. But anyway, Loveland, if you prefer that at tight end, trust it, right? Luther Burden, Missouri first-round wide receiver that slipped, right? Steal. Big ass Ozzie Trapilio, right? To solve a tackle issue, right? And then Sherman Turner at DT, and that should have been a higher pick. That was Studley, right? 3 seconds, and I believe they traded back in to get that. But like, my God, they got 4 starters in that first round, in the first 2 rounds, right? They got 4 starters, and you can't say you hate that in any way, shape, or form. We lost Monty. He's okay. Maybe he's just too upset about the race talk. I hate it when someone has to bring up race. Try and talk race in a way that is like, not me coming off as like, oh, it's never racism, because I'm white and all that. Yeah, it's a tough time to be white. Okay, final thoughts. I guess Monty will come back in. Adnan, you could do a final thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, on the Jets side, I think they did a good job in the draft. I'm happy with the direction that they're going in. I find it interesting that they didn't draft a developmental quarterback. They had to know about Jordan Travis kind of going into the draft. For them to punt on quarterback, I don't hate it. Don't invest resources in a guy who may never step on the field for you. I think you're looking at Justin Fields. If you can't unlock him, which I doubt they'll be able to, you'll have a pretty high pick next year in a loaded quarterback draft. So I think they're doing, a good thing. They're building it the right way. Solid football players. They're bringing in tough, aggressive players. So I really like the draft and just the overall direction that they're heading.
Go ahead, Monty. I tried doing your final thoughts. I'll just do it. Like, Monty wish I was better at making football bets than John, but I just cannot beat John in any of these bets. Okay, now you're back. Go ahead. It's true though. Go ahead, Monty.
Yeah, my connection's fucked up.
Okay, well, we'll just leave it as those were Monty's final thoughts ever on this show. Was that he wishes he was as good as making football bets as John. The draft was fun. I thought the Sanders thing, the slide was definitely the biggest story of the draft, just because of the high profileness of it. And it actually made the whole draft very entertaining to watch all the way throughout day 3. I will say that. And after that, I think day 3 lost some juice. But it was still a fun draft to watch. There was a lot of talent in this draft class, and I think it's going to not so much at the quarterback position, of course, even with Sanders, but still controversial at best. It's going to be very interesting to see what this talent does, not just from the Jets perspective, but also the rest of the league, because there's just a lot. The college players are just getting so much better and more pro ready. You know, it'll be very interesting to see how they perform. And I'm really glad we went Membo in the end, just because our O-line is set. And yes, Simpson's going to have to get extended in order to make it even more set, but it's set this year. You don't even have to think about it. It should be a top line, and you win in the trenches. And Aaron Glenn preached it so much. Like, you start inside out. That was the thing, right? Inside out, right?
Yep.
Which is better than all gas, no brakes, because it seems less bullshitty. But I'm very happy with the way that the draft went. Could have it gone better? Of course, it always could. But in the end, this 1 week out, you're just not going to know until 2 years into the road and you see these guys perform. But I have a nice hat on. It's one of the Laugh Through the Turbulence hats. I got it from the swag stop. Buy our swag.
Buy our swag!
Are you in need of ethically sourced, 100% non-toxic, laughter-inducing apparel?
Buy our swag!
Do you long for merchandise that respects your right to chuckle in a safe, turbulence-free environment?
Buy our swag!
Look no further. The Laugh Through the Turbulence store is here to provide you with the most socially conscious, eco-friendly-ish, and cancellation-resistant merch available.
Buy our swag!
Our products have been metaphorically crash-tested for comedic integrity, ensuring they meet the highest standards of non-offensive, inclusive, and totally New York Jets-approved humor.
Buy our swag!
Whether you're looking for a t-shirt that says Laugh Through the Turbulence, a New York Jets podcast, or a hat that says Laugh Through the Turbulence, a New York Jets podcast, we've got you covered.
Buy our swag!
So, take a smooth, seatbelt fastened journey over to our store. The link is in the bio of our YouTube page, and shop with confidence. Because the only turbulence you should experience is watching the New York Jets.
Buy our swag!
Disclaimer, no actual turbulence was used in the making of this match. Side effects may include uncontrollable giggling, heightened fashion sense, and an overwhelming desire to talk about the New York Jets. Ha ha ha.
Buy our swag!